Actually.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining this panel on Grassroots tonight. My name is Laura Quarto, and I am the Artistic Director of Leiden Shorts, which is running from the 2nd to the 5th of September in Kijkhout. This panel is part of a series of events on Dutch multicultural society, which address contemporary issues in relation to multicultural identities in the Netherlands. Dutch Grassroots movement is a collaboration between Easy Solutions and Leiden Shorts. For any further information on this event or the other events in our series, please feel free to contact us after this event. Without further ado, I will leave the floor to our moderator and speakers. Please, an applause for Cemil Yilmaz.
Hello, my name is Cemil Yilmaz from Easy Solutions. An honor for me to moderate this event. It was quite an adventure actually to come here because I lost my keys into the canal. So I had to go into the canal with my boxer shorts to find my keys, but I actually found it, so I'm really happy today. Welcome to this event. It's going to be an event with a lot of interesting speakers. Forgive my English, it's not my native tongue, but I'm doing my best I can. Maybe for me also good to know, because I know there is Corona and COVID, but I like an interactive event. I was vaccinated 2 times. I was tested negative. So, is it a problem if you have a question and I come to you and I do like this? No, it's okay. Does anyone have a problem with it? So I can. No, nobody. Okay. Maybe also good to know, because it's an English spoken event. Who is from the Netherlands itself? Ah, okay. And who is more internationally? Oh, now I'm interested. Where are you from originally?
Greece.
Greece? French? Oh, okay. And sorry? Germany. Russia?
Caribbean.
Ah, okay. Who had his hand also held up? Ah, here. Morocco. You?
English.
Ah, English. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna invite you. You didn't know it yet. We have a real interesting program. We have a panel with Nawal Mustafa. I will introduce her short after this, and also Mariam and Maslouhi, 2 powerful women who are really active within the anti-racism movement within the Netherlands, but they will tell about it themselves. But before we go to the panelists, I want to invite Laura and Melissa, because you organized this short film festival, and I saw that the theme was rooted and then the Dutch Multicultural Society, and I was like, okay, but you're from France and you're from Italy, and why did you choose these themes? Would you come over? Okay. Can I have applause for that? Yes. We've got real interesting microphones for you.
Oh, this is fantastic. This is very comfortable.
Okay.
I like it.
Yes. Well, maybe because when I saw the website, I thought, oh, really interesting, because you use movies as a tool to discuss and to show social change, right? How did you come up with this theme about Dutch multicultural society, but you're from France? What was the link? What was the reason for you to choose this?
So it was a very, very long process. So it didn't start with us thinking that we would focus on the Netherlands. We initially, last year with everything that happened, we saw the Black Lives Matter movement that had a sad regained due to sad events, and then we saw the increase of anti-Asian hate due to COVID-19, and a lot of movements, or there was a lot of social unrest the past years, and it felt the past year that everything went down the drain.
Yeah.
And there was this whole talk also about Zwarte Piet in the Netherlands, etc. And we saw all of these bits of conversation, and we thought we think that is very important for us as a festival that tries to really show films that explore these kind of topics, and to actually bring it to an international audience. Because this conversation about grassroots movements, about diversity, inclusivity in the Netherlands is something that is most of the time in Dutch, which is very important, but it's a conversation that can be applied to Italy, to France.
Yeah, it's universal.
It's universal, right? It's obviously rooted in a culture in particular, but the problem is often very similar.
Yeah.
So we thought it would be very interesting to really focus on the Netherlands, to see, it's interesting for us to see the difference with our countries, but to also make sure that this conversation is available to people that don't necessarily speak Dutch.
Okay, and for you, Laura, what are the similarities but also the differences between like living in Holland or in the Netherlands and Italy?
With regards to this scheme?
Yeah.
So I come from, some of you might know, it's a pretty conservative country, which is the reason why I left. And what I loved from the moment I came to the Netherlands is actually the fact that you see that it is multicultural. It's something you see, which in Italy is not really the case. Italy has not yet reached the point where if you're not white, you can be Italian, which is absurd because we have a huge population that comes from all around the world, but there is still this conception that if you don't look Italian, if you don't look white, you're not Italian. So that's something that I always found incredibly, well, what's the word? Problematic in Italy, and that's something that here, the first time I arrived, I thought like, wow, the Netherlands are so progressive, so liberal, everything is working, but the but comes. After a while you live in the Netherlands, you actually start digging and you understand it's a lot of, you see on the surface, but if you look deeper, the issues are similar.
And what did you find when you look deeper?
That I have the impression it's you can do whatever you want as long as you do it in your own house. So that's a bit the general idea in the Netherlands. But deeper than that is there is an idea of the Netherlands being very multicultural, but there is the Dutch and there is the Dutch with multicultural background, which I still find a huge issue in the Netherlands. But I mean, this is your conversation, I don't know.
Okay.
But this is the observation I did as an expat living in this country.
Okay, thank you. And the same question for you, but then the comparison with France.
That's a very long conversation. I think France is a very problematic case in the sense that we've been a massive colonial power for decades. I've decided that some country in the Middle East were going to become part of France and would not even be a country anymore. So yeah, that was, and nowadays when we have people from that had ancestors in Morocco, Tunisia, or the countries of the region, we just don't consider them French, even though we actually wanted to make the country France, which is just completely incoherent at the end of the day. So there is always that thing of, on our side, we want to do what we want, but just don't come. We want to be there, but you can't be back here. And there is still a massive issue, and I mean, even now the next presidential elections are coming up, and one of the main issues is the far right is rising, and they're just surfing that wave of immigration talks and multiculturality and what it is to be French. And it's problematic that decades like later, this is still something that we have to talk about, because it's like...
Okay, thank you. And for you both, the last question, and then I'm going to the panel. There are a lot of different short films you're showing during these days. Which one does everybody has to see and you think like you can just only pick one, and like oh, you have to see this one because like if you look at this one related to the topic we're talking about, this is the one.
Oh, this is hard.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, I'm gonna dig into one of the 3 guest sessions we have this year. Because
Yeah.
we have asked Cinema in Amsterdam, iAfrica in The Hague, and Cinemasia to actually curate a session for us with the theme of this year. And I would like to talk about the film of Festus Stoll, though I don't remember the title of it. Because what I found really interesting about his film, he's a Dutch filmmaker, and he basically made a documentary to go back to the origin, to his ancestry. So he went back to the country of his grandparents and confronted this reality back there. So it really translates this idea of growing up in the Netherlands, where in the documentary he shows how he was educated to feel like he was different from the day he was born because he's black. But when he goes back to the native country of his grandparents, he's also not considered black anymore.
Yeah.
So what I found really powerful about this film is the idea of being in between, where you constantly, you know you belong, but you also don't really know where you belong, which I find very powerful, but I don't remember the title. I will find out.
Okay, thank you. And for you?
I feel like that I'm going to be unhappy with the choice I make because I'm probably forgetting other films, just, you know. But one of the films we actually showed at the opening yesterday is called I Don't Feel at Home Anywhere Anymore by a director called Viv Li, who is Chinese. And she made that document, like she left China a few years back, and she actually made this documentary about her, again, going back home and this idea of transition as well, of how do you, I'm repeating what you said, but it's
the feeling of expat. I think.
Yeah, I think
you don't feel anywhere at home anymore.
And it's really this idea of culture identity, because as you move around, you create bits, you pick up bits of everywhere and then build up your own identity for that.
Thank you very much for enlightening us. And I hope I'm a little bit curious, like, why did you came today? With what expectation? What was your reason to come? Can I ask you? Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna ask you even if you don't want it. So, what was your reason to come? Well, what was interesting on the topic of today?
I think I studied photography at the Royal Academy of Art in The Hague, and I did some projects also around this theme, also racism against Asian people, and so that's why I'm very interested in this topic.
Okay, thank you. And you said from the Caribbean, right?
Yeah.
What was your reason to come today?
Can I get back to you?
Yeah, of course, no problem. It's like I'm just being impolite because like you don't want it. I'm not putting the mic in your face. Just tell.
No, I'll answer you.
Okay. And for you?
I can answer, it's fine. Well, no, I am interested in the subject first of all because I'm an expat myself. I have difficulties answering the question where you're from because I've been living in the Netherlands for 8 years and I don't really, I can relate to what the lady said there. And generally, when I was studying, I actually focused on Surinamese immigration to the Netherlands in the 80s and racism around it. So for me, let's say Dutch culture and Dutch multiculturalism is still a very vague concept, and I had a very hard time agreeing with the fact that the Netherlands is really liberal and accepting, and I have seen so many examples of that not being true that, well, it's just interesting to still have to continue talking about this because I don't think that a lot of things are changing.
Okay, thank you. Well, it's a complex and paradox topic, especially in the Netherlands. But we have some interesting panelists who can talk about this. Can I first introduce Nawal Mustafa, PhD candidate and one of the founding mothers of Speak, platform against anti-Muslim racism and sexism within the Netherlands, and one of the leading figures. Can I invite you? Can I Hij doet het geweldig. Ja. Goed. And our second guest is Mariam Maslouhi. She has a beautiful podcast, Dips House. She's one of the producers of the podcast, which isn't a podcast anymore, Fufu and Dadels, but she's also was one of the leading figures of the anti-black, anti-Zwarte Piet movement within The Hague, and a lot of different movements. So can I also have an applause for Mariam Maslouhi? Yeah. Very good, very good.
I'm gonna already correct you.
Oh,
I just produced the first season of Fufu and Daddles, and then they went on their own. You have to let the birds fly and grow.
I apologize. Sorry.
So it still exists. You can still subscribe. You can still listen to them.
We have to excuse our third panelist, Rui John from Asian Rations. She was going to come, but she cancelled last minute because of her illness. And well, we know all the rules around COVID, so we had to excuse her. But well, let's start with you both. The topic about multiculturalism and grassroots movements, a really broad topic. Maybe first of all, can you tell us something about your research with your PhD and for the people here?
Yeah, sure. And weirdly it connects to multiculturalism, even though I focus on the UK. So my research is about regulation of mixed intimacies, so interracialized couples, and the regulation surrounding those type of relationships. Oftentimes it's considered that Europe did not regulate interracialized marriages, and I say interracialized because I don't believe in mixing as a way of because then you suggest that there are different races and so on. So and interracialized kind of covers the concept where the gaze is sort of creating a difference between the couple who's dating. And the idea behind my project is basically that there is this notion in European countries that we haven't regulated interracialized relationships, but our hypothesis is that we did, but we did it differently than the States, which had prohibitions that were clear in law. So I researched in the UK, okay, what kind of regulations have been used to sort of regulate, and I stumbled upon, in order to understand this, I kind of had to look at the history of immigration in the UK, and I focused in the post-Second World War period. So then you see the whole Windrush generation coming to the mother country, basically, which is their country, right? So and then you see how race comes up, and how this notion of whiteness, Englishness related to whiteness, which already existed, is sort of then used to communicate who belongs and who doesn't belong. So those type of things are questions that I look at.
Okay, and which comparison can you make with the Netherlands, or which similarities or differences?
So many.
Can you give an example?
Yeah, so I do archival work, and I'm not a historian, I'm a legal scholar, so it was a whole new thing for me to discover. And one of the first times that I went to the National Archives in the UK, in London, is I saw how they talk about belonging, for instance, who is Dutch or who is English, along exactly the same narrative is being used. And also, interestingly, UK has been a great imperial power. They've been all over the place. And one of the first things that I did was look at the map, because my project kind of told me, okay, this is the topic, do your research. And then I was like, okay, where am I going to focus on? And then I was looking at, and then I decided to look at the map and see what countries have been colonized by the British. And it's just shocking to have that imagery in your face, even though I knew it, but just to see the image. So they are also a great power, right? So, and the Netherlands has maybe in a slightly earlier period was also a huge world power. And you see the same narratives being used about what we get to do elsewhere and what others who come to our country get to do, what kind of rights do they have. And it's fascinating how innocent these countries seem to present themselves, right? So they, to quote Gloria Becker's terminology of white innocence, it is so shocking to see how in the Netherlands, in the UK, you see similar narrative of, no, we went there to help them, to civilize them, to educate them, it is never we went there to steal their resources and colonize them. It's never, that narrative is hardly found. And another point just quickly is movements to connect it to grassroots is that already in the 60s and the 70s in the UK you see people who have a minority background, even though I don't like that terminology, were already resisting this narrative and challenging the notion of Britishness, and they also were challenging curricula, for instance, and sort of producing counter-histories, which race and class and gender are included.
Okay, thank you. And Mariam, maybe you could tell us something about your podcast, Dipsaus. What is it, and why did you begin this podcast?
The Dipsaus podcast has actually become the Dipsaus platform. So it started 5 years ago. So in November we're going to already turn 5 years. It was because 6 years ago we did an interview in NRC. It was about, what was it about? There was this white journalist who wanted to talk to 4 outspoken women of color and black women of color and talk about racism in the Netherlands, the anti-Zwarte Piet movement, and we said yes, and then the article turned out to be, taken out of context, and it was a whole, we sued them, we won. And then we felt like this is exactly what we mean. Every time when you're interviewed, or so many times if you're interviewed by the mainstream media, your perspective is in the, whoa, I just saw this.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Very colonial.
Yeah. Yikes. Hi, colonizer. So we thought, let's do it ourselves then. I had no experience in media. We do it with Anusha Nzume and Ebise Babjira Rao. And the only one who had experience in media was actually Anusha, but what we wanted to do is just make a platform just to interview other people of color from our perspective. And when you do that from my perspective, you already have a different, a complete different conversation. So that is actually, when we introduce Dipsaus is the podcast by and for women of color. And just to say that in the Netherlands is already like, oh my God, you're excluding everyone, and how can you say this, and etc. So that is actually, so we interview people, so it's actually a talk show where we're being very unapologetic, very loud, a lot of cackling, but also a lot of just sharing our experiences. And from there we started also publishing books, also just from our perspectives. Almost, when we wanted to publish our books, we did a Dutch version of The Good Immigrant. You have the American version, you have the UK version, and most people just said, just translate it. So we said, no, you cannot just take the UK experience or the US and just like insert it in the Dutch experience. So we asked if you...
What is The Good Immigrant?
The Good Immigrant is a bundle of just stories. It's like it's sarcastic. Like when are you a good immigrant? When are you a? So it started in the U.S. and it's just a collection of stories of people of color, different from all different types of backgrounds. And we made the Dutch version. So we asked.
Okay.
We asked writers, we asked non-writers, and what non-writers of color would say is like, yeah, but we don't know how to write like the Dutch way. And we said, there's no Dutch way to write. We are fine with the way we want to talk. and what we want to write down.
Okay. I want to make a link also with the Dipsaus and grassroots organizations, because like you have to be well rooted to choose the right people to invite for your podcast. But like for me, grassroots is like a container begrip. I don't know how to say it in. It's like a really broad term. What does grassroots really mean for you? What is the definition of being grassroots or being a grassroots movement? What is it for you? I'm going to ask you the same.
Prepare. I find this what it means to me. To me, also words mean things. So grassroots to me begins from the ground and from the people you do it for. So we never. I remember when we were thinking about podcast, and people would give advice and they said, "You give a voice." No, we don't give a voice. The voice is already there. You need something to amplify it. You need something to make it stronger. So to me, grassroots actually, what it means is creating from your community. So Dipsaus would never be able to exist if we didn't have a community. If we didn't have a community where we nurture each other, where we take care of each other, where we also fight together. So to me, grassroots meet in community, and from there you move. So.
And how did you decide, or how do you decide who your community is?
I think something like that happens naturally. The way I met Ebise was at a demonstration in Amsterdam. The death of the murder of Michael Brown, and I remember Mimi Madmothers was this amazing black activist who, from what I know, was a large demonstration, and for the first time and this must be 2014 or 13, where we said like Black Lives Matter in the streets in Amsterdam. That's where I met Ebise. Anusha I've seen on TV before social media say Zwarte Piet is racist, and cry over it because, as she said, I have a black son. So how you choose your community and how it creates this kind of grassroots movements is because you have a certain history together. Like my roots are in Morocco, Ebise Ethiopian, Anusha Cameroonian, Russian, but we still can relate to each other. We know what we can relate to each other, we know what we go through, and we have the same vision of fighting it.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And for you, what is your definition? What is grassroots for you?
Yes, it relates a lot. I think Mariam is obviously a creator and a podcaster and so on. So I have a different, because I'm in academia, but also with the work that I do with Speak. For me, one of the...
Can you maybe first a little bit tell us about what Speak is? I don't think that the people know what it is.
Yeah, so Speak is a collective. It's not an organization. It's a collective that we, together with Bernard Toprak and Saida Darassi and Ibtisam Abbasis. Ibtisam is started a hotline against Islamophobia or anti-Muslim racism in the Netherlands after the terrorist attacks in France and in Belgium. And the other ladies are both activists working on organizing around anti-racism and gender issues. They're not specifically on gender issues, and Saida on anti-racism. And the reason why we started it was we saw a lot of Muslim women, and we wanted to focus specifically on Muslim women because the debate is often about Muslim women, how we dress, what we're allowed to do, whether we're being freed or not, or oppressed, or blah, blah, blah. So, and none of us kind of recognize themselves in the image that has been painted, and oftentimes either, so that was the thing that kind of all annoyed us, and we were not, I mean, each one of us was doing something else, but we would meet at places of demonstrations or like gatherings, and then we would talk about all of the things that annoy us, and then we sort of organically, as Mariam already indicated, started to talk about, okay, maybe we can do something about it, and maybe we can sort of connect people. One of the things that annoyed me the most is that you would see something would happen somewhere in Europe, and a TV talk show, whatever, entertainment news thing would invite a Muslim woman and then butcher her basically, and then attack her, and then just vilify her in front of everybody, and nobody would kind of step up, and that person oftentimes would go in good faith in trying to explain stuff, and just, it was just horrifying. And we saw that a couple of times happening, and one of the ideas behind Speak was sort of to connect people and to build bridges and to sort of help each other. So if you have a certain expertise, if you have media training, for instance, some of us are journalists, some of us are podcasters, right? So you can exchange the knowledge that is already within the community to sort of connect people. So that's the reason why we started it.
Yeah. And how are you grassrooted within the community you're doing?
That was the, so one of the inspirations for me and definitions of grassroots is Ella Baker. I don't know if any of you know Ella Baker, but Ella Baker was one of the organizers during the civil rights era in the States, and she's not well known because she was always behind the scenes organizing, right? So her philosophy was basically not to find one charismatic leader, often a man, and then let him be the face of the movement. But what she did was oftentimes go into a specific community, ask for, because she was a grassroots organizer, she had extensive knowledge on how to do it, right? So she would go into a specific community, she would ask the community what they needed, and she would look at the people within the community who had certain skills, like maybe speaking or organizing, whatever, legal skills and so on, and she would amplify that. She would help that person reach his or her highest potential. So it wasn't about her, and for me, that was one of the reasons I wanted to be part of Speak. And what we did is sort of build a model behind that as well. So what we do is also organize small gatherings in like living rooms and so on. We did it in Eindhoven, we did it in Groningen, we did it in Rotterdam, in Den Haag, where we invite people, women, Muslim women, to come and talk. Basically, sometimes we have a theme, sometimes we don't have a theme, and they kind of tell us what the issue is that they want to talk about. During the Hague event, we had a movie, so connected to the Leiden short thing, and it was a movie about surveillance of Muslim communities worldwide, and then we invited somebody to come and talk to us about it and knowledge building and exchange. We have a WhatsApp group with more than 50 women active, Facebook group obviously, and we organize, we're part of demonstrations. And interestingly, one of the things that we were very afraid of is being hijacked and sort of being turned into this tokenized image. And that's one of the reasons why we did not want to be talking to the media in the first 2 years, I think, of us starting.
But now you're talking to the media.
Yeah, I'm not, so I don't know, because I'm focusing on my PhD, so I started to, I'm not involved in the board and so on. I'm just involved as a member, but not in.
But it was interesting to see, as from an outsider, to see how much trouble the Dutch media had in defining these women. What are they? What are they doing? Organization, movement, you know? You could see really the confusion of mainstream white media not understanding what these women were doing.
And it was funny because I recall the demonstration in, I think it was 2018 that we participated.
The Women's March?
Yeah, the Women's March, and we have, purple is our color, so we all were wearing purple headscarves for those who wear a headscarf, so it's not a requirement to have a headscarf. And some of the people in Speak are also not Muslim or practicing. So it's just,
so you also belong to the community if you're like an ally?
It depends. We have to talk about that because allyship is also complicated. But so we had all purple headscarves or a shawl or something that communicated, and we had and we were walking. And the media, we had so many media journalists come up to us with their cameras and so on, trying to talk to us, and we would just walk and not speak to them. And they were so confused, and they just wouldn't let go. So they would try with me, they tried with Berna, and we already communicated that we were not speaking to the media. We just wanted to participate, and you're not interested in what we have to say. So we're not interested in speaking to you unless it's on our own terms, right?
Yeah.
So that was interesting to see the shock, and sort of they were also not used to being denied, right?
Yeah.
Saying no.
Yeah.
And they were all looking at us like, but we're the media, you want to talk to us.
Well, if you look at grassroots movements, some people think it's not necessary. Some people don't understand it, maybe. What is for you, Mariam, the most valuable thing of a grassroots movement? Why does it have to exist?
I think because for me it speaks, I think you say truth to power. Yeah? So it's this constant bully of power that in the case of Dipsaus, the reason why after 5 years we're not this super big company and it's still just the three of us, has to do with that we wanted our independence so we could be that voice that is constantly saying, hey, this, hey, that, hey, but we don't agree with that. So to me, being grassroots and not like institutionalized or being part of a company, we were offered to join the Correspondent or whatnot, but we would lose our grassroots, we would lose our roots in the community because in a way we would become unsafe. And so.
And would you look, well, I don't know why. Would you lose your credibility and why?
I think in the case of Dipsaus or in the case when, in activism and when I would organize, it's not that you lose, it's not because you join that you lose your credibility, it's because when you join and you become institutionalized, you have to leave, a big part you have to leave at home. But that's the most important thing, what they ask you to leave at home. So for example, as Dipsaus, if we would, for example, join a big media house, they would say, hey, but those are our friends, we can't really say anything to them. And we would choose to stay independent because or else nothing changes. And I think the same thing as an activist, for example, for Kick Out Zwarte Piet, you get offered a lot of things. Right? You get offered like, hey, you want to come here and do like this diversity thing or an inclusion thing, but we weren't there yet. So when it's grassroots and there are still people in November till December painting their face black as a way of celebrating a holiday and ignoring black people in the Netherlands, then yeah, you lose a lot if you don't stay grassroots, if you don't stay the very radical, grassroots, radical also means in the roots, within the root or from the roots. So yeah, I think you would lose too much. Yeah. I mean, there's at one point, so we're not there yet in the Netherlands. The only reason that we haven't seen blackfacing is because we're in a pandemic. So we don't know what's going to happen next year or this year. So we're not there yet to become anything other than grassroots.
Okay.
And stay grassroots.
And for you now, you're also an academic. You do a lot of research on institutional racism. If you look at could you give maybe for the people who are not from Holland, give certain examples of institutionalized racism from the Dutch context, and why it's so important that there are many and different grassroots movements who are fighting against it.
Okay, so I think obviously Zwarte Piet is an example, a symbolized way of looking at institutionalized racism in the Netherlands. Another thing that we have been talking about a lot for the last 2 years, if not more, is the tax toeslagenaffaire. I don't know, what is the English? Yeah, what is the toeslagenaffaire? What is toeslag? Like benefits that you get from the tax.
I'm going to look at Google.
I mean, because it's also like, it's so Dutch.
It's very
such
Dutch.
a thing.
Yeah.
So it's like the taxes system in the Netherlands.
Right?
Yeah,
So it's
not
like you're
subsidy.
subsidized. It's almost like you're subsidized.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
So you get a benefit.
Scandal.
Yeah, benefit scandal. So you get a benefit from the tax company in the Netherlands, which is really weird because the belasting, the tax, I don't know, is it company, institution, should collect taxes, but in the Netherlands, that's also institutionally interesting because they also give benefits to individuals who qualify for it. And the benefits are a lot of different benefits, right? So one of the benefits that they gave is for children to go to daycare. And there has been a huge scandal over the past couple of years about this, precisely because some of the parents, especially parents with double nationality, so non-white parents who applied for this benefit were suspected of fraud, and then they were put on this list, and they have been, and they had to. So the way it works is you get the benefit, but then you have to pay it back. So once they had to pay that back because they were suspected of fraud, there was a investigation going on. At the same time, they had to pay everything that. So you also get money for rent, right? So everything that they got from the tax institution, they had to give it back. A lot of these people were qualified as frauds, and which sort of created like multiple issues with losing jobs, losing houses, unemployment.
They were innocent, and the only reason
they were suspected. That was the only thing, and because there is this notion of going hard against crime and especially fraud and so on, which is also racist because it has a long history. So I recently co-authored a piece in the Dutch, Nederlandse Juristenblad, is the Dutch lawyers journal, magazine, yeah. And where we kind of talk about, there is a lot of outrage about it, right? And there has been a research onto this. And
I'm going to ask you a question. What are you looking at?
Am I boring?
Okay.
No, so what they said, so they were, there was an inquiry into how the government conducted this, how the tax institution did this. And in the inquiry, which is interesting, it has been made clear that you were considered to be a risk for fraud if you had double nationality.
So we're not talking about French.
Right, so if you had a Moroccan background, Turkish, Surinamese, whatever, Somali, whatever second nationality, you were suspected. So what they did was they didn't include that as one of the research points to be looked at. Like, what is the institutional racism aspect was not included in the parlementaire enquête, so in the research that has been done. And we connected in our paper to migration, because I work at the migration section. You see similar things within migration, and migration is built upon excluding people. If you look at, for instance, visa requirement, every country that is not white, except Japan, is oh, I'm sorry, it's my phone.
Well,
it's my.
Who's calling?
No, nobody. No. Sorry. So those are examples of institutionalized racism within migration, within visa requirements. Talking about expats, there are certain rules for people who are seen as expats. There are other rules for people who are immigrants. So those kind of things are deeply embedded in our laws, in our institutions, and so on.
Yeah, we also see
can
it
I
in the labor market and within the educational system.
Yeah. And I'd like to add also is that these parents, these people, within 2 months, they were in debt for thousands of euros. There are people who had to sell their house, and they had children who had to, there are people who really did not know where to go.
Yeah, they divorced or mental and health problems, etc.
And just to add to that, so it's not only the tax company who did all of this, it's also the courts who kind of did not look at the situations at hand. They really did not consider what was happening. Instead of keeping the institution in check, they were part of the problem.
Yeah, but if that's the analysis, why is it then so important to have a grassroots or a movement?
I guess just to be short, so within academia, I don't believe anything changes unless there are grassroots activists out there who are being critical. that's the main thing, because the only change that you achieve is when there is force from the outside, and the outside is often grassroots activists.
Yeah. I've got a lot of questions for you, but maybe that in between. Does somebody have a question from the audience? Yeah.
I think it's quite interesting when you can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
When you hear at the when you look at the Wikipedia page on the
Sorry, I think the.
Oh yeah, I have to give you this because like otherwise the camera cannot hear your question,
I know.
and afterwards they will kick my. No.
Sure. Okay. Oh, okay. So you hold it. So when you look up the Wikipedia page for Mustafa, I don't know if you've done that. It begins with a description of a justification, essentially, of why this happened, going back several years to Bulgarians coming in the Netherlands and defrauding the state. This reminds me very much, in connection with the slavery exhibition in Amsterdam, of the Dutch approach to how they justify a lot of their actions. It's really the official story of, well, you know, something. We were justified in doing this, but there is a leap from an original, possibly, you know, sort of gang illegal action that was happening involving a specific group of people to generalizing to a completely unrelated group of people. That's where you see, because of their last names, because of their religion and things like that. So I think that's where you can really see institutional racism.
I totally agree.
And so I was shocked when I looked at the page and found that they found this way of justifying their own actions. And I think historically it repeats, because only the official story is allowed to sort of emerge. So this,
we kind of criticize the Bulgara affair, which you're referencing. That is also highly problematic. I mean, the racism also towards people from Eastern Europe is also a problem. One of the, I know Cemil from previous work on ethnic profiling, where they would say, if you see somebody from Eastern Europe, write down the number plate number, right? And his or her information. Those are sort of, because they're seemingly white, it's not seen as racism, but it is racism.
It's exactly how you started. The moment they come, you know, to Western Europe, they're being racialized. So also, like, the Polish, Bulgarians, Hungarians are becoming racialized once they step foot here.
But also the Dutch wish to explain and justify is what bothers me.
Because the Netherlands,
something that is actually wrong.
Because the Netherlands has an image to defend to the international world. The Netherlands has their big stakes. I mean, also, I remember when Roger Ross Williams, a journalist of CNN, came here to the Netherlands and make like a short documentary for CNN about Zwarte Piet, and that pissed off the Dutch. Then they said like, oh, okay, no. But you can also see like on Schiphol, at the international at the airport here in Amsterdam, they don't display Zwarte Piet because they have this image to defend to the international community that the Netherlands is this tolerant, this country where you can come and be yourself and be your, you know, and excel in anything you want. So they don't want to know about this toeslagenaffaire, about you know, white people blackfacing here. So I think that also has to do with this Dutch, this Dutch idea of white innocence, but also like we're not as bad as the people in the United States. We're not Trump, but also the Dutch think, you know, everybody thinks of Amsterdam and it's so tolerant, and all the queer community has an amazing time here, you know. So
just raise your hands, and otherwise I will come by. And I did not forget you. You still, I'm gonna come to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. It's super interesting to hear you speak. I was curious, what is it that you maybe need from Dutch society to be able to properly do your work as a grassroots movement against racism?
Oof. Not vote VVD.
Finally.
Like, I mean, we've had, like, the cabinet, you know, fell over this, about people, you know, and then there were elections, and then they won again. what I need for the Dutch society is to care about people of color here in the Netherlands. I need the Dutch society to see us as humans, as people who have rights. I'm not going to say I deserve rights, I already have them, but they're not applied to me. That is what I need from the Dutch society.
And you know, what do you need?
I think for me it's also important to take racism seriously, and I really recognize what the lady in front said about explaining and thinking that makes it okay. I'm like, even if you explain, it is not okay, you know, like the problem with racism is still there, even if it's not, and there is this obsession with intentionality, right? It's not my intention to, but I don't really care about the intention when the impact stays the same, right? And this is the same thing in the Netherlands, and I'm just, you know, like whenever you start to point out all of these flaws, it's like, ja, maar je hebt het goed hier, or you have it good here. I've oftentimes, whenever I'm critical, I'm told to go back to my country. I'm like, this is my country, so where do you want me to go back? Groningen? Fine. But also, like, those...
Or don't complain.
Don't complain, exactly. So you already have it well, don't complain, it will be okay, be patient, all of this way of, and there is this investment in gezelligheid, you know, like we all have to be like gezellig. I don't even know what the English word, I don't think there is an English word.
We all have to get along.
We at Easy, we call it polder racism.
Yeah,
like the Dutch are really known for making consent and consensus.
Exactly.
So everything has to be nice and cozy. So we call it polder racism. Like, it was not my intention, but like, it's too bad.
Yeah, and I think that we have to get rid of that mentality of, you know, like being okay.
I've got another question for you.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I think I sort of get I feel what you mean, but it would be nice to hear from you, Nawal, what you mean with the problem of forming or allies or
Oh yeah, for my earlier point. Yeah, it depends. I feel like racism is not my problem, right? Racism is a societal issue. It just happens to be that I am impacted by it disproportionately than others in society. And I feel like it also it doesn't only dehumanize people of color, it also dehumanizes white people as well. So I feel like if you are invested, if you want to change the society that you live in, you also need to do the work, and part of doing that work is losing control, but also part of doing that work is being, when you're addressed in the harmful ways that you might be behaving, that you shouldn't be defensive all the time, right? You shouldn't be like, oh, maar ik deed mijn best, or oh, I was trying. And I feel like, and not second guessing if somebody comes to you and shares a story or shares an experience of racism, one of the worst things that you can do is sort of question how if it was for real, you know, like, but could it have been this, or was it this, or was it that? I don't think that's not something that is useful for people who are already dealing with this. So those kind of things are important, I think, and I think don't make yourself more important than necessary, right? So oftentimes I see people, especially people who are so-called, you know, like active and who are aware of their whiteness and so on, and then all of a sudden they are telling me that I'm being racialized, or and I'm like, can I just enjoy my evening? Can I have a drink? I don't always, even if I see racism, I don't always want to deal with it, right? I just want to live my life. I just that kind of thing. You don't have to point out racism to me, right? Those kind of things are why I sometimes find it draining to have these talks about allyship. Just do the work, don't bother people, and see it as your problem. That's the
Can I add on this, because I've thought about this a lot. So I am actually a fan of, Cemil and I differ on this, but I do like to use the English language sometimes especially in the Netherlands, where sometimes Dutch words don't work.
Yeah, we had a lot of discussion.
Yeah, so sometimes Dutch work, we had like, I remember when the Dutch when I say the Dutch, I usually mean like the Dutch people in the media, that they think like, oh my God, white supremacy is a thing. you know, and then it becomes white supremacy, denk, etc. And kind of the same thing happened to allyship. So there were grassroots organizations, and right now I'm specifically talking about Kick Out Zwarte Piet, etc. And then you have all these like well-willing white people saying, I'm an ally. But they have no idea what it means. If you are a white ally in a fight against anti-black racism, and it doesn't cost you a thing, and your life stays exactly the same, then you're not an ally to me. You know, and saying that to people who would demonstrate, for example, allyship for me, when I read it, when I see it in the civil rights movement, is at the demonstration where there's a lot of police, white people go to the front and black people can hide behind that. I remember 4 years ago saying this, and everybody was like, no, we cannot do that. That's putting people in danger. And there I was occupying the Erasmusbrug, being very visible to police. You know, we did not have. So, what happens in the Netherlands often is that we take a thing as allyship, and we just insert it, and we don't think about it, we don't criticize it, or we don't think about it in a Dutch context.
Yeah,
So
and
that
also
is-
just to add to that, I don't think it should be only a label that you use in your Twitter, or right. That also often happens. Same thing with feminism. Men who are saying, "I'm a feminist," I'm like, "Good for you." I have no idea. That's what I'm like. I don't want to talk to you. Yeah, it happens.
Yeah, I know it happens.
Yeah. So that is, I like to use, I was at the Sonsbeek Festival in Arnhem, and there was Barbie Asante, an amazing artist, collector, curator, and she said that she prefers the word friend. Because before you use the word friend, you think about it, before you can say, you know, you can call anyone ally, so I'm very careful in who I call my friend.
Thank you.
I like that.
Maybe another question from someone. Well, I'm going to my Caribbean friends. Yeah, that's you. Well, did you think about what you want to say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just you're gonna hold it.
Yeah, it's like the rule of being a host. Never give up the mic, because I did it once, and it took me like a half hour to get it back. Yeah.
So basically, I have two reasons to come here. Actually, my first reason was I do know the person that is from Asian racism.
Oh, yeah.
She's a good friend of mine. She's been supportive of her, so that's why I was coming here. Basically, the second reason was that these are things that I love. I'm from the Caribbean, so I am the closest to when it comes to slavery and things about these topics. So I've been dealing with this for all my life, since day one, since I came to the Netherlands, and I like these topics. They're very informative, and they're very, you know, it's very, sometimes more eye-opening to me, because like you said, like you can only see from my perspective of my experience or my faults or what happened to me, but it's also good for me to see like for other cultures, you know, French, people like minorities. Of course, we're not going to use a name, but I'm actually proud to be a minority, because I'm proud of where I'm from. I'm proud that I'm not part of the Netherlands, but I am kind of part of the Netherlands.
The kingdom, right?
Yes. So I am. So I really like these kind of topics, basically. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for
very
coming.
much.
Yeah.
Does anyone have a question? Yeah.
Actually, for the Dutch-speaking, Dipsaus actually interviewed Ruyon, so if you're interested.
Yeah, and I think it's a pity that
she couldn't
be here.
Yeah.
And I just want to say something maybe based on my research about Asian minority and racism that they face historically, but maybe after.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm from the UK, so I know there's a lot of things that I think, oh, this resonates. This kind of, and one of my big things I think in lockdown was just actually, I hate to say it, but the first time really learning about empire and the effect. And then once you start seeing that, especially the UK's and England, especially their influence, then I've kind of looked around here in the Netherlands, and yeah, nobody has an idea. It's not really spoken about. I have a museums background as well. I'm an archaeologist, and I go in museums and I think like the Volkenkunde exhibition on Indonesia, Jesus, like, honestly, like, oh yeah, we gave half of it back. Like, well, what about the other half? So, you know, and there's just not a discussion, and I think in 2018, UPOL did a poll, and they asked empires, countries, asked the people what questions about empire, and the Dutch were actually found it more proud than England. I just wanted to ask, at the end of all that rambling, what's it like in the education system here?
As a student or as an educator?
Both, but you know, what do Dutch kids learn here?
Nothing.
Like, I can already tell you that about the transatlantic slavery, I've learned nothing. Like, the Dutch will pretend they never set foot in South Africa, for example.
But then you have words like apartheid and boerenoorlog.
And wow, Nelson Mandela, amazing. And then you have just a little bit about, like, I can remember just a small part about Indonesia.
Yeah, I think that was worse.
And that was worse.
Yeah.
But nothing about, like,
there's now a little transition because of the BLM movement, etc., and the discussion and the movement around anti-Black Pete. That there's now a slow transition in, like, oh, maybe we have to educate the children in the primary schools on this topic, but will it be one page or two? Nobody knows. So that's the big question mark. But maybe for you made a reference to Indonesia. From February or March, there will be a really interesting exposition within the Rijksmuseum about the period after the World War II, 45-50, when the Indonesians had their war of independence against the Dutch, and the Dutch wanted to not to give up their colonies. So that's a really interesting exhibition, what is coming next year.
So I think the Dutch live in this twilight zone where they basically themselves don't know much about their colonial history, and that they know some things about the UK or France, and they say, see, they were worse. I mean, look at us. We were pretty good folk, no? Yeah. So I think that is the innocence, the why. Please read Professor Gloria Wecker's White Innocence.
Yeah, I think, just to go on to that, you don't get a lot of education, but I feel, I was in Indonesia a couple of years ago on holiday, and I went to the museum. And I'm educated here, but and I was already working at the university when I visited Indonesia, and it was just shocking to see from the perspective of the Indonesians themselves what actually happened, what the Dutch did, because here we called it the politisionele acties, so it wasn't even a war, independence war, right? So that was really fascinating to see. So we don't, if you compare it to the UK, there is a lot of scholarship on empire, there is a lot of scholarship on critical engagement with empire and what empire means today for the multicultural society that UK has become. So that is interesting, but in the Netherlands, we really do not have any of that. And just to connect to that, one of the things that kind of shocked me is, so in my research, I focused on intimate relationships, and I learned that in the period before the Second World War, it was the Chinese seamen who were being expelled from the UK because they were also seen as a threat to white women there, right? So that was the thing that was happening there. And then I found out, because the professor I work with, Betty de Hart, is doing research in the Netherlands, the same thing was happening in the Netherlands as well. But then a little bit later in Rotterdam, in Katendrecht, if you look at that. So you see that this is also a history that, and that's what I wanted to say, it's very important to see how it's not, this whole racism against Asian people is not new. It has so long historical roots in multiple different European countries that it might seem as a surprise now, right? That everyone is connecting it to COVID, but I think it's longer than that, and I think we have to look at that. And I really think it's a pity that
Yeah, that she's
couldn't
not
be
here.
but it's
Because
really
like
important to look into.
you also have like the Pan Asian collective of Gooi Gooi Pan, and
Yeah.
like the beautiful thing of what Asian Racians and what she also does with Pan Asian collective is the work they do is like they said this was already here.
Yeah, exactly.
This is not something
Exactly,
new.
it's not new.
You have it in words, in Dutch jokes, you have Dutch
In
songs
yeah.
even, and it's like the only thing what made a difference is that like the community raised their voice.
Exactly.
That was it. They
Exactly.
make themselves more visible. Yeah, so it's pity that she isn't
So
here.
even you know like a TV show such as the Ik hou van Holland. The stereotypical it just baffles
Translation
me.
is I love Holland.
And it just baffles me that they have this person who I think he has Asian roots or whatever, and then what they do is he comes and he's like the entertainment, and he has to put on like headphones, noise cancelling headphones, or he hears a song and then he needs to like sing it, and then they need to guess. The guests often celebrities have to guess
What he's singing.
what song he's singing, and it just. I remember being younger than this and not even aware of all of these things, and just seeing this and thinking, what the actual fuck?
Okay.
What do you mean? This is not okay.
I want to make a link back to Grassroots,
Yeah.
and not only about we talk about why is it so important, etc. But what are the challenges of being a grassroots movement is? Because like it's sometimes a really thin line where you walk on. So what are the challenges of being grassrooted, of being to keep your credibility within the movement or within the communities you do it for?
I think the biggest challenge is the energy and the effort, because you should never be able to make a living off grassroots, because then it's not grassroots anymore, then it's just your job. But it's difficult to juggle. For example, I was a social worker and then active as a grassroots activist, and then building a media platform. That's a lot to take on, and I know
a lot of different roles to integrate.
Exactly, and I know for a fact that so many other people of color here in the Netherlands that are active or in the grassroots organizations struggle with this. So keeping the energy up, keeping the hope up, I think that is, if you're able to do that, because you always have to stay sharp, because you're between a lot of fires. So from institutions, from media, from all other people that you're threatening, that they call it. So I think that is a big challenge. It takes a lot of the work you do as a grassroots organizer or activist. You can say that it's very like ondankbaar, ungrateful, because if you make one slip up, it's done.
Yeah.
But you have to remind yourself that you're not doing it so that people can say thank you. You're doing it because you want change.
Yeah.
So I think that is the things that you have to juggle.
Okay, and for you, what are the biggest challenges for you or difficulties?
I think I'm not sure if I agree with Mariam's point of not earning money through activism, because I understand, but at the same time I'm like, it's always the people that actually are financially not stable who are doing the work, right? So I also feel like financial resources should be allocated, and I think one of the issues with grassroots organizing is that there is lack of money, lack of time, lack of people. Everybody's doing multiple jobs. And I feel like, I don't know how, but there should be financial resources allocated to the people who are active in and doing the work. So I think it should also be rewarded with finance. So that's one thing. And another thing that I kind of find, because I never signed up, I think all of us never signed up really to be an activist or whatever. I think we just become because it's just the way it is. But I also feel like it's challenging because it's a collective of people from all walks of life, with different ideas. There is sometimes not a lot of coherency. It's not like oftentimes people think, even with the anti-black racism movement or anti-Zwarte Piet beweging and so on, people think that there is a whole strategical thing happening and that people are well organized and communicating and so on. And I'm like, no, it's just random people trying to make the Netherlands a better place. That's it. That's the bottom line. And there's not a lot of thought sometimes, but that is in itself challenging, right? And for me, what I find really painful is to deal, and now I'm specifically speaking from Speak. I find it really challenging when, difficult to digest when Muslim men are the ones who are attacking the women who are organizing, right? So the within the community, not only Muslim men, let me not put that out there like that, but also women, people from the community that you're trying to, you're part of, and who also have to hold you accountable, can sometimes be really unfair and not willing to sort of give you grace, give you space to error. And that sometimes it's very discouraging for, especially also
the margin of error is really thin, or doesn't exist.
But also
sometimes.
like this, as you know, when you're trying to, like, I believe in not one cause. So I believe in a Speak and a Kick Out Your Defeat and then a feminist, you know, and all those things next to each other. But then be solidary with each other,
exactly.
You know, and that is what I'm missing so many times. So I saw here, you know, when it's like, okay, so there's a Muslim man saying this, and then a white man criticizing this, and then a white woman who really should know better. You know?
But is that also not the whole discussion about intersectionality, and you have to be solidar if you have to show solidarity for one cause if you are fighting for your own? Is that also not sometimes the difficulty for, how do you say? Well, that was sometimes for me the most difficult thing of being busy with a grassroots movement, etc. Is like you do it for social change, but like for me it doesn't matter. I help the LGBTI community. I help the people who are busy with their fight against feminism, for example. Or if it's Speak, it doesn't matter for me. I'm saying, oh, they're busy with justice, so if you need my help, I will help you. But at the same time, sometimes like, oh, but Cemil, you are losing your credibility within this community because you're helping them.
Yeah.
And that is also something I was struggling with, and now I don't care anymore.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, no, it's a struggle. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think maybe this is gonna sound a bit like I don't know, like wishy-washy, but I think we live in a society where everybody is harsh all the time. And I'm like, just give people some grace and some room.
Yeah.
And I feel like there is no kindness, there is no love. And I think part of grassroots organizing, part of the work that we do in social justice, even the work that is being done now, should be nurturing, should be care work, should be like, I miss the emotion in the things that we do, right? It's also emotional work. So I feel like we have to have more love and more kindness.
It's so funny you say this because I've become hardened.
I know. Not you, but I mean for me, I know. It's a scary thing to see myself become embittered, right?
Exactly. So I do have to check myself all the time that I'm not, you know, that I think the word, like also in the last couple of months with a lot of like political, how would you say this, political
drama.
I think the word I found was compassion.
Yeah.
Right? I'm reading like this wishy-washy book that's called like Radical Compassion.
Yeah.
But it's, to me, it's so, it is hard because I've been doing it for a long time, and still exactly what you said, like the people who you think like should know better and should be, that you're actually thinking like the fight I'm doing will benefit you in the long run before it will maybe benefit me. That makes it sometimes a little tough.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to an end, but before I do that, are there any questions? Yeah, 1, 2, 3. Okay, I will first go to you.
Hi, thank you for speaking. It was
thing or struggle that I'm facing daily is when racism is that. As for me, I'm shy and I don't know how to confront people with racism. And for most of the time, as learned in the Asian community, just get over it and just play along with the community and that all. But it pisses me off of myself that I don't speak up, and also not for the community. And also, if I see racism, that I don't know how to speak up. Do you have any tips, or like how do you guys face it? Because I see you, or when I hear you, it's powerful. So it's for me, like, how do I get to be powerful like that?
I think you don't always have to react at that moment. You know, I also always believe in that you can come back when you've just like got your thoughts together and just like realize what just happened. I really do. I do not believe in what happened happened. There's always like this thing of accountability. There's always, so I would really just say just take your time. Yeah. And I think that sometimes, don't get me wrong, sometimes I don't react. Yeah. Sometimes you let it go, but I will sometimes come back to it 2 weeks later. And then even though if the other person doesn't remember it anymore, if it's at work or at your university or anything, I do believe in accountability and I do believe in comeback. So it doesn't have to be right away. But I also would say like what helped me is just watching lectures. And it's not really the same as when you're in a situation of work or in a situation of school. But just, the thing is, racism is very boring. So it doesn't change. It's usually kind of the same. So you can just read books. I mean, Hallo Witte Mensen, do you read Dutch? I think Hallo Witte Mensen from Anusha Nzume, I read it and it also gave me insights of like, if somebody again tries to touch my hair, she says try to touch her boob. See, of the same. And I never knew what to do if somebody tried to touch my hair. Usually it becomes this very like super aggressive, or I just say stop. But now like if somebody reaches to my hair, I do, and then it's like, hey, what are you doing? So so read books. And there's so much out there. You really don't have to invent it all by yourself, and you're really not alone. A lot have done the work before. Yeah. Also, the words I use as, friend instead of ally, or the thought about allyship. It's not that I made that up somewhere in my room in The Hague. That's the work of so many others before us.
Yeah, and we at Easy train a lot of people on those coping mechanisms, we call it, because what we see in real life is most of the time the people who come to us are not like, angry at the person who like discriminated against them, but like they are disappointed in themselves because they couldn't react as they wanted to react at that moment. So what we try to learn them is like how to channelize your emotions at the moment it happens. And if you cannot do it at that moment, you can do it different way. Maybe you're a good writer. Yeah. You can write an email. Maybe email, or maybe an opinion in an article about it. And maybe you have a broad a network of people who have experienced the same. You can organize a seminar or a workshop for them to also make an impact and to help them to learn how to cope with this kind of situation. So there are a lot of different ways. I wanted to say Rome, but that's not it. There are a lot of different ways.
Just on the writing point, I might come across as really vocal now and so on, but I wasn't vocal or outspoken about all of these issues, even I think as early as 2014. And what I used to do and still do to process my thoughts is to write, even if you're not publishing, to write it down for yourself so that you can, because sometimes you're so emotional, you don't know how the words can come out, right? So I just write it down, and it's just the act of writing it down calms you, and then you can look at it, and then you can then decide what to do with it. But to ask of, and I hope that we can go to a space and a city or world where you don't have to think about being vocal, and I feel like you should just live your life. But if you want to do that, maybe writing it for yourself before you publish it might be a good act.
Thank you.
Okay, so I can quickly add to this point because I'm actually a professor. I teach in The Hague as well to an audience of more than 500 students. And I've been asked this question by one of my students. Sometimes they recognize some of the things I'm talking about. They feel that they have been a target and they don't know how to respond. And I was like, well, sometimes it doesn't pay to respond in the moment. No. You are not going to change the mind of the person that already has this wrong opinion. Process it, save it, and then, because this has happened to me, you can present it to an audience of 500.
Yeah.
And it's much more powerful because you can also explain to them why this is wrong.
Yeah.
You can make them think about why this is wrong. And then you reach an audience of 500 instead of one whose mind you're unlikely to change. Right. So there is a lot of, I think the channeling that you mentioned is along the same lines, which if you don't have an audience of 500, you can write it in a newspaper or tell your friends, tell your circle of
share it, always share it.
Over coffee, but then you can really explain your point of view. Now, my question was slightly returning to 2 questions we received earlier, because I felt both for the person that said, what do you want us as Dutch people to do, and for the person that asked what are Dutch kids, or what are kids in this country taught as. And as the mother of someone who goes to an open bar, so a public, non-religious school, I'm surprised, but wasn't born in this country. I'm surprised by some of the things that have to do with the official absence of religion and implicit presence of Christianity in the cultural landscape. So when I asked in the earliest age of 4 and 5 the teacher to maybe when it was Eid, which is beautified as Suikerfest, sugar celebration, but to Muslims it's actually Eid. When I asked the teacher, you know, this is what's coming up, could you maybe mention it in class, or could you read a book about it in class, because such books do exist also in Dutch and in public libraries. But no Dutch person picks them up. It's only the people of Muslim background that pick them up. Well, that's not breaking the barrier. So if Dutch people were more open to the non-similar people who are around them and curious to learn about them and understand their beliefs, what their lives are like, and taught that at school from an early age, I think that would be a huge step. So it bothers me that this isn't supposed to be a Christian school, but
it is.
But Christianity is there in many of the choices, and people are surprised. Kids that have a Muslim last name are thought not to be allowed to eat sausage on October 3 in Leiden, which would have been traditional, and they're not given sausage a priori. Why don't you ask? Why do you make these assumptions about what people are like just because of their last name or because they're wearing a headscarf? They may be making their own personal choices, and people don't bother. We just label.
Categorize,
universal, but I think it's a way forward for people as well to help.
I think many in the Western Europe world live in this secular myth.
There is this, I don't know if you know the work of...
that's a total different topic.
No, Anya Topolsky is writing, since you're a professor, she wrote this article I think might interest you, about how we don't only have a color line in Europe, but we also have a religious line, which is precisely what you're talking about. Anya Topolsky. Race, religion, constellation. If you Google it, you will find it. It's a wonderful article.
Oh, there's one more question.
First I'm going, you had a question.
I know you moderate this talk, but I would really like to know more about these solutions, because
what we do,
what you do, why you do it, and how it has changed. I know it's a very
everything.
I can also. I worked for you.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
This is fascinating. I think people should know.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe at the end. At the end, I will tell something about the work we do. Yeah. Okay.
How casual.
Yes. No. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh no, I'm going to hold it. Thank you.
Hello. So I don't live. I mean, I've been living in Netherlands for the last 7 months, so I'm very new. So my question could be very
welcome.
Thank you. But as I understand from your speeches, you're first targeting for your communities and to empower people. But if you were actually targeting somewhere in the state missionary, what would it be? Or like, do you also targeting anywhere like the parliament to change somewhere within the system? So I was curious if there's a good target there or if there's no hope.
I think maybe you should go. Good question for Mariam.
Thank you. No, there definitely are. I mean, on the 12th of September, there's going to be a big demonstration for better housing in the Netherlands. So actually, most of what we, or what I did had a specific political, because everything is political, right? So, for example, like my approach is more that, like to speak truth to the power, to be like, okay, who's in charge here, and let's organize against that. There is, like for example, when it comes to Zwarte Piet, if you have a city municipality and they say we're not going to fund it anymore, then you have solved a very big problem. So that is when I target like if it's local government or national government. So I think that always it goes hand in hand, because you cannot, be an activist or organize grassroots something if it doesn't have like a political a meaning or symbol, even symbols. So yeah, those are a few examples.
Yeah, and from Speak, we not only the demonstrations, but we also write opinion pieces for instance, with the introduction of the burqa ban, the face covering ban. We wrote about that and organized around that.
But also demonstrations.
Yeah, and also demonstrations. So it's like different arenas. It's not only the community, it's not only a demonstration, but we also like publish reports. We published a report about how media, what kind of imagery they show when they talk about Muslim women. We're writing now a paper on neutrality in relation to court cases and the headscarf bans or headscarf indirect discrimination, so on. So we do a lot of different levels.
I have the last question of tonight for you.
The last question. It's a good one. My question is actually about emotions. It's a little bit similar to an earlier one, but like, how do you deal with rage or just being pissed off? Because there are a lot of people that they don't mean it sometimes, but they like you said, that they can touch your hair. And it's a very cute way to say, well, you start reading your book, but you are not always in this very good mood. And of course, my experience is completely different, but I have also in the past 8 years heard so many stupid remarks about my origins or stereotypes, but at some point I would joke about it, but sometimes I slap because I cannot handle it anymore.
I think first and foremost that Maya Angelou said, anger is good as long as it doesn't make you bitter, but turn it into something, action, writing, whatever. And I think that is something stayed with me because, you're always being told you need to explain it in a calm manner. You have to look people in the eye and tell them they're really not racist, So I do think people are entitled to their rage. I have every right to be angry. I have every right to sometimes snap and not always be composed. So first and foremost, I am very, from my perspective, I've told myself that I can feel, because it has been dehumanizing for people of color all around the world that they should be careful of being angry, so you'll be perceived as an angry black woman. Don't move your hips too much, because then you're a promiscuous Moroccan woman. So I've told myself I can be all that. I can be angry, I can be happy, I can also be, but then I'm very strategic. So I know when and in what room that when somebody tries to, like when I'm in a club and someone tries to touch my hair, it's over. But if I'm at work, I'll make a joke because I have rent to pay. So in all those different, I code switch, I adapt. But there are times where I do not have that energy, and I tell myself that it's totally fine.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I don't always I think it's important to show your emotions. You don't have to, you're a human being after all, so it's okay to be pissed off. And I think for me, I play around with it because I like to make other people feel uncomfortable. Because I've always been felt uncomfortable in a lot of spaces, so now I'm just, whenever somebody is like being weird or like blatant racist, if I have the energy for it, I will annoyingly ask the same questions until that person turns red. And then I'm like, okay, now I'm gonna let it go. But I think what is important to and it connects to both of you is, so I work at the university and I've had issues of also racism, you know, like people asking me to identify myself. To show my card and so on, because they don't see me as staff. So the first time I was like, I don't want to engage, so I just walk around. I have a huge headphones, noise cancelling headphones, so I just walk around with them on, even if I don't have anything on. So I walked away. The second time I did the same thing. The third time somebody was like, can I help you? And I was like, nope, and I walked away. And then the fourth time I was like, okay, I was prepared, right? So it happened continuously. Then I was like, okay, let me create this awkward interaction since you want to have this awkward interaction. So we did, and then that person, but still, even if I feel like I'm regaining some of the control, it cost me more than that person, I'm sure of it. Because I left with a headache, I left with being pissed off, I left with so many emotions with me. And I don't think there is I don't think we have a cure for it. I don't think we have like a tip to deal with that. I feel like just be kind to yourself and engage whenever you want to engage and be pissed off whenever you want to be pissed off. I remember one time I was speaking in a panel and this guy was so horrible and I just started yelling at him. And it's not really my style, but I was just so sick of the same questions all the time. And I was just like, and what about you? And what about this? And what about that? And as soon as I ended, I was like, oh, what the hell did I just do? But then I was like, let them know.
No, it's okay. I think that's also like the moment that you let your emotions show, then you're the angry black woman.
Exactly, but I was
or
like,
you're the bearded Muslim guy who's, you see, why? We also have a right to be angry or disappointed or be emotional. For me, the most simple thing is I mirror. Like, if I get a stupid question, I ask stupid questions.
Exactly.
Like the last time that somebody touched my hair, I was touching their hair. And it was like, what are you doing? I was like, yeah, exactly, that's my point. What are you doing? Or the sincere question of why. Like, why are you making this remark?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, did we play together?
Yeah.
Do you know me? Like, who are you to make that? And then they feel uncomfortable. Yeah, that's good. Like, I don't want their negative energy to become mine. Mm-hmm. And that's how do you say, a boundary I don't want to cross anymore, because been there, done that. It's
also like Oprah said, the power of no. Just like no.
Thank you. Can I have an applause for Nawal, Mustafa, and Mariam and Maslouhi? Thank you. And I want to thank the organization for inviting us and to organize this. Maybe to answer your question, for the people who don't know us, Easy Solutions is a social innovation bureau who's busy with innovative solutions for social issues. We do a lot on diversity and inclusion, community building and organizing, but especially around different topics on racial and social justice, anti-black racism, anti-Muslim racism, racial profiling. We have a platform against racial profiling and police brutality, and we do a lot of different things, organizational advice, but also a lot of lobbying and advocacy towards political parties, but also towards the ministers, etc. On a national level, but also on a local level in the big municipalities where the how do you say, the Dutch of color live for the most. So we do a lot of different things, and I think the reason why we did this, because my business partner, that's Dion Abdulhabiskan, I think it's similar, because like we were born and raised in the Netherlands, but you are shaped not only by your parents, but also the daily things you live, how do you say, you come across in life. My story isn't different than Mariam's or than Nawal's, than Dion's. So I can tell about, I think in my life maybe 150 or 200 times I was stopped and searched by the police while I did nothing. I was refused at a club because of my ethnic background. They gave me a lower advice within the educational system. I've faced labor market discrimination, so it's a part of who we are, and I think that's one of the biggest motivations for us, like to make a difference within Holland and to work on a social and racial just society. And I think that we have chosen those two topics because it's the closest to us. And we are a friend of a lot of different emancipation movements, but you only have 24 hours and 7 days a week, so you also have to choose your battles and to manage your own energy. And I think where we are the most proud of is everything we do for the civil society, so for influencers, for grassroots organizations, idealistic organizations, but also for just the civilians and the starting social entrepreneurs is always for free. All our events, our trainings, our individual guidance, because we really believe in giving back to the communities we came from. So that as a conclusion. Okay. Thank you very much.